Hello. Hello.
Morning.
Hello. Welcome in, everybody, to Ready, Set, Action. Today, you're joining Christina Whitmer and myself, Deborah Horowitz, along with our special guest, Judd Jones, as we present ideas on the topic of how AI is impacting SEO. As each week we pick a topic and we break it down into three actionable tidbits of information that we hope you can take away to drive business growth. So today we're going to discuss hows and the whys of the impact that AI is having, what we need to know. And so stay tuned and thank you for joining us. Judd, as always, it's a pleasure to have you join the.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And for those of you that do not know Judd Jones, he is a go-to expert on Ready, Set, Action for all things that are related to data and analytics and SEO. He has his own organization, Jlytics. And so we're very pleased to have him join. So, Christina, before we get started, was there anything that you'd like to add before Judd just takes over and rolls with it?
No, I'm sure I'll have some questions as we go, but I'm looking forward to this bit of education for myself.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Was geeking out a little bit earlier this
Oh,
week about this topic. SEO has been something that we've always had to be mindful of, but I heard this phrase that it's no longer search engine optimization, it's search everywhere optimization.
I like that.
And I thought that was very impactful and really brings home the fact that there's more options than just being a slave to Google. So, Jen, I know you've got some like a sequence of how you want to lay this out for us so that we all understand where we were, where we are, and where we're going. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Deborah, Christina. Okay, great. So, like Deborah said, I think it's important to understand or think about, first of all, we're marketers and content creators and people who care about all these things, not only as individuals, but also as people who do what we do for a living. So, I think what's great is we have an opportunity collectively to actually not only surf, ride this wave as things are changing, but also to help form where things go and help guide that. In order to do that, I think it's important to go back to understanding our history a little bit as government. So let's talk about search because that gets us in the right headspace for SEO and then moving on to LLMs. So very brief history of search. So again, this will be super truncated and high level. But basically what we found is in the mid 1990s, right around the time that the World Wide Web became a thing, different companies, actually mostly researchers at universities, came up with ideas for how do you sense of all that content? Because as you started getting actual web pages exchanged by HTTP over the World Wide Web, someone could figure out how do you actually find the ones you're looking for, which I didn't take for granted because of tools that we have available to us. But it was not an easy problem back then, especially as you started getting more pages. So you have Yahoo and Lycos in the mid 90s. Then you had, of course, Google introduced up at 1998. And today, and so I'm going to focus on Google because it's the big gorilla in the room, but of course there are many other search options as well. And Google does have a huge foothold on the market with currently in 2024, Google has 87% of searches. So all traditional searches. I'm talking about within the search engine realm, not including things like people searching on large language models. 87% is with Google. And that was provided a huge engine of growth. And this is really important to think about because all of them might right. Google's revenue last year, just for its Google ads, which is its main revenue driver, was $237 billion last year, probably a little higher this year. And that makes up the majority of Google's overall revenues, ad revenue. So why are we talking about ads if this is an SEO topic? Because what SEO is the driver that makes people create content, that makes people compete to make better content, that content, along with Google's ability to find the right content for the right person, is what drives their whole ad mechanism. So it's all related. So even though paid ads and SEO are totally different in terms of Google's world, they very much SEO drives all of this because of the need to create the right content for searches. So the impacts of search briefly, what did Google bring to the table? And I'm using Google as a placeholder for all these companies. Number one, it allowed people to find things they were looking for, pretty obvious, in better ways than prioritizing knowledge. It also caused the webmasters, content creators, and marketers to compete for that number one position. That's really important. So anyone who's done SEO before knows they want to be at the top of search. So that's created an entire cloud of industry around people as people and others trying to get number one. It affects webmasters, content creators, and marketers. And of course, that also created more of an incentive to get more content online. People thought, gosh, this is now a marketplace for my ideas. And I can get, if I do things right and I'm ready to make good content, I'll get to the top of this search engine, which is like this very steep mountain. The very top is where you want to be at the top of Mount Everest, so to speak. There's only a very small spot up there at the top, and that's where you want to be. So all of this competition, it cannot be overstated how important that competitive element is for people to create better content, which of course search rewards that. You get this virtuous cycle of better content gets to the top, more people create deep content. So that's how it's been working for a while. One other thing I'll mention on this kind of the brief history of search, promise for marketers has been, if you build great content, they will integrate user experience, people will come and that's been the applied promise. Of course, like I said, it's a huge revenue driver for Google. And just briefly, what does search really do for you? It offers quick information. It offers things like definitions. What is this? What is that? It gives you news. It provides links, and it can return thousands or even millions of pages. That's important. Talking about that versus large language model. It's keyword based. Generally, it's search term based. Now, it used to be just specific keywords would bring up specific pages. Now it's more of a semantic, less it can be a keyword that means something that's not necessarily on it has some gotten sophisticated, but it's essentially a keyword based on the words that you type in the search terms. It also can return images and text as well as videos. And so that is the brief history of searching products to the introduction of large language models. Pause there for the commentary or questions.
I would like to just, you might jump into it later, but just if you have any additional comments later on or now about snippets and voice search, right? Just generally, because I do find that snippets are like, it doesn't give you the result that you want in a way. Like you go for a snippet, but the truth is nobody's ever going to click. How do you understand the value? So I'll just add those two for maybe future.
Yeah, that was great. So that's a great question, Christina. So those are tools or things that people who create the search experience have added to create additional bits of information for you, for us. I think that's all going to continue to evolve. Different people use snippets to a different degree, but all those types of sort of additional results come up are there for a reason. The ones that are clicked on and used tend to persist. Google's always trying new things. They come up with new rollouts. They just had a core update in May of 2024, but they'll continue to roll updates out. And every time they do, they have certain functionality, both in terms of how you search, how it generates results, which websites get more priority in terms of that search experience, and what type of information comes out of it. And voice search is something we use quite a bit as well. So questions or comments, anything else on the word traditional?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Should we move on to the next section?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the introduction of large language models. And again, for those who aren't familiar with the term, LLMs and AIs kind of been used interchangeably. It's too deep of a topic to get into the subtle differences, but essentially, large language models are a flavor of AI. They're one way of doing AI, which is to take a huge, I call it corpus or a body of work. Usually it's millions or billions of web pages that are publicly available. And then these sort of training techniques, they crawl the pages and they create a huge neural network. And that's as deep as they'll get in the technology part. But essentially what it does is they have to train that model and then they can then go use them. So I'll give you a little bit more example on that. So OpenAI is the one that got a lot of attention early on. Its first one was the ChatGPT 3.5, which came out in November 2022. Another popular one is Anthropic's Claude AI. We just come out with more versions since then, including versions that allow you to process text, images, audio, and video. So it's becoming more sophisticated. These large language models, or LLMs, are much more, and I'm sure almost everyone on this call has tried using them or maybe uses them every day. They're more conversational, so they're more interactive. But it's really important to note that they're trained every so often. So they're not trained every day. So if something just happened yesterday in the news, probably not going to show up in your LLM result because it just happened yesterday. The model was not trained on that data. So how often are they trained? Depends on the model, every several months, sometimes every year, depends on what the model is. That would probably change over time. They'll probably get faster at training more recent data, but that's essentially the difference. The resultant impact has been huge. And so because of people just using these, whether it just be for fun to try it out, or whether it be to actually use it in your job as a tool, people are using it quite a bit. And I'm saying ChatGPT, Claude, several other ones. There's the user kind of versions that people might just use on their desktop or laptop, but all of these companies also offer APIs or background methods for getting that data into apps and things. So companies are building tons of products that actually are using ChatGPT or these other large language models and pulling that data. So it's important to understand that difference. So the basic user experience for those of you who may not have used them is essentially type in some words or phrases, they call it a prompt, and you'll get some sort of return on that. And you could specify the style you want, how many words you want it informal or formal. There's a whole field called prompt engineering, which is all about how do you best put the prompt in to get what you want out. So there is some expert knowledge required in order to understand the best way to ask a question. So it's like the quality of your question will absolutely affect the result. Contrast that to search, where you just type in some keywords and maybe a sentence or a phrase. You don't have to be quite as specific as far as how you word it or how you want that data back. Google is just going to return those links and those pages that you look. So what was the impact in the world on this? First of all, of the large language models. First of all, Google sat up and took notice, and in mid-May or so, they rolled something out. Well, they rolled out Search Generated Experience, SGE, which basically is a little summary at the top of the page. They rolled out in limited form, and now currently it's on every result that I see, or at least most results. There are some types of searches where it's not returned, and there are companies out there who monitor stats on this. So let's call it 75%. It's gonna vary depending on the search and the day as this evolves. But a large percentage of the search queries that you type into Google today are going to show you a summary at the top. Now, this is a huge deal if you're in SEO or marketing, because why is that? Because users are able to get the content that they need at the top of the page. There's no incentive to scroll down further to look at the actual web. That's an impact that very specifically and directly impacts, like I said, anyone who runs a website, anyone who wants content and eyeballs coming to their website. And so that's a huge impact. So Google and other search engines have taken notice. You've got Bing has rolled out an image generator. Google has image generators now, and those are getting more and more sophisticated as well. You can specify not only words coming back, but also pictures. And that's going to all continue, of course, to get better and better. So what are some advantages of large language models? So if I'm a person, let's say I'm a business person, since we're talking about marketing, but it could also be a consumer. We're talking about a B2C situation. I'm looking for knowledge. I'm looking for information. What's the advantage of going to a large language model as opposed to search? So here's some advantages as it stands today. And this is going to evolve and talk about today. Tend to get a little bit deeper dive. You can get writing help. So it'll actually write something for you. And we all heard about college students having essays written for them instead of writing themselves. But that could also go to marketers who are having content written for them. Talk about that as well. It can help you just be creative. Hey, give me some ideas for X, Y, Z. Give you ideas. It's very customized to your search. Like I said, compose articles and posts and presentations. It can compose code. So as a data scientist, I write Python code, and I'm able to write code faster now with CI because it can I can structure a query. It can help me write it, and I can go test it. I can go back if it has an issue better, but it's actually writes code. It's pretty amazing. It's, conversational and interactive. And it also does a great job of summarizing. So you summarize in fewer or more words. It's going to do a great job of bringing that back to you. Contrast all that with just a result of up to last year on Google, where it's just a bunch of web pages that come up with little descriptions on each one. Very different experience. What are some downsides to large language models, especially in relationship to search, but also in general? Downsides are what they call hallucination, which is a real term that they use. It can actually, people who tune these models can actually change a parameter for how much you're allowing it to hallucinate. So talking about maybe creating something, creative writing or something, you might want it to hallucinate more instead of make things up that maybe don't exist. You can also turn that temperature down to have it hallucinate very little, but you can't really completely eliminate hallucination. It's always going to we're currently at the state of the world in terms of LLM, for it's going to create some information that's not true. It's just not real. So that is a challenge when you're looking for factual information. Gosh, you told me something that Berlin is in France, something like that. It's not, it's going to give you the wrong answer. Not very often, but it does happen. It also does not return links. Now, we're going to talk about this in a minute too, because that's evolving and changing. With Google or other search engines, you can actually go through and click on different websites and go deeper in these different areas because you're actually getting links returned to you. Large language models, typically, again, this is changing and evolving, but right now, they typically just give you text. They also don't give you context or source citations or citations of where did this information come from? And that's also, you got to lead into our third section, this thing about that lack of citation. And they're a little bit less exploratory in nature. So whatever some good points by Lori there. Absolutely. So whatever you're looking for on Google, have that. You're an investigator, you're an adventurer. You go through these pages and poke around and find, much like going into a cool antique shop and looking around and see what's there. LLMs tend to package it for you. It's all packaged and there it is. And again, that can be fun, great, convenient, or it can be not so. And this briefly, before we go to the third section, downsides for marketers. I think this could hurt content creation in the long term, even the midterm, because if you think about it, you just repeat in your head and think forward in the future about what we're seeing now. Imagine the extreme case where everyone starts creating their content using AI and people are not the original content because if they're, I'm talking about the worst case scenario, this could happen. I think we're going to find ways to avoid this, but the worst case scenario would be that everyone is relying on AI. So it's recycled already based on other content. And then there's really not much incentive to create content for human because it's actually human generated, because search engines aren't going to get people websites, the actual citation or reference. Hey, this is where that came from. There's very little incentive for someone to create new content because it's, of course, the worst case dystopian scenario would be that we end up with this recycling mart of content that doesn't really have a lot of new ideas. Obviously, we're going to collectively find ways around that, but that's where it's the tempted to go. It could go that direction because you have less searches, fewer searches are resulting in people going to web pages listed on a Google because either they're using large language models or less searches overall, or they're using Google, but they're relying on a whole summary at the top more. So you have less people going to that could really hurt organic traffic, and it ultimately down the road, it could hurt user experience because of the reason I mentioned earlier, people don't have incentive to build that. That's an so I'll pause there.
I have a question, Jed, based on what you just said, because I have thought about that too, is what happens when we get to this place where everything is just recycled. And I've always found AI to be reluctant to ever say that it's wrong or it doesn't know things. So do you think that will eventually improve where you say, what don't we know about something? Or I don't know.
That's a great question. That's a great question. If we asked it, what don't we know, it would probably try to find sources where we'll talk about what we don't know. And they would that it is, at the end of the day, this is one of the biggest misconceptions. I've been working with neural networks for 15 years or longer, not building large quick models, but I know how they work under the hood. And they don't know, they don't have any knowledge, they don't have actual intelligence. They have is abilities to synthesize things that are already there. Now, obviously, it's going to appear more and more like they have intelligence. People who are concerned with, oh my gosh, the computers are taking over. There will be a day in our lifetime probably when it's going to seem like they're sentient because it's going to be so sophisticated. But at the end of the day, it's not really sentient. It's just really good at seeming like it is. And so there is going to be that question of how do you get new knowledge and how do you fact check knowledge that's being presented to you? How do you create true creativity in this way because of the lack of connection to the real world other than what it's reading from what other people write?
Yes.
Other thoughts on that?
To your point, I think it's totally evolving. And it feels like on a day-to-day basis, feels like it's coming at us faster and it just keeps changing. And it's a bumpy ride right now for us in marketing to try to understand what we can leverage. And then I almost feel, I feel like a stronger urge to develop more content just because of what you were saying before. It's the, instead of regurgitating the same content, shouldn't we be also looking at how do we continue to influence what it is that they are returning in those results?
Yeah, I agree. Fascinating. And I agree. It's that pace of change is going to increase. I do think though, for marketers and just general population who's concerned about all this is the best way to not be concerned is just become familiar with these tools.
Um,
It takes away that fear factor of, oh my gosh, because they are just tools and you can use them. And like I said, most of us probably already have, but incorporate them into your daily life and hopefully you use it as a way to enhance what you're doing. Much like getting into a car today, I can go a lot further, a lot faster, but I'm still driving that car.
yeah. And I'm curious to know, do you feel like the LLMs get into a rut in terms of the information that they're returning in the results? And if there's a way for us as users or as marketers to help to leverage visibility through those LLMs. And is that a topic for your final section or a topic for another day?
Yeah, that's a
That's
deep question. Let me go through what I've thought about for this, and then I think I'll touch upon that a little bit. But that is an excellent question. That's a deep question for sure. So briefly go our last few minutes here and where I think things are going, the road ahead. So Christina and I were talking a bit about Perplexity, which is a tool that's come out. There's another one called Search GPT. And these are based on, in the background, they have OpenAI's data coming in to them as far as how they're working or how they work. But you can poke around in Perplexity. It's a little bit of a hybrid between a search engine and an AI to LLM model like using Claude or ChatGPT. It does show images, it shows links, so it's a little more exploratory. I think that's a good example of where things are going. I think all of these tools, Deborah has mentioned, these are moving so fast. They're going to converge on each other. They're going to change. They're going to evolve. They're trying to always stay one step ahead of each other, which is a healthy competition for the rest of us. But I think you're going to have less of that line between search and large language models is going to blur very quickly within the next 6 to 12 months, I think, and into next year for sure. I did find some studies on people who had tested Google search versus Perplexity, and they did a Venn diagram of what they're each good at. And what I found this particular study said is that what they're both good at is recalling a fact. Oh, what was the year this movie came out or whatever? That can be done. But Google tended to do better on more exploratory searches, like we talked about, more meandering. Let me check this out. Let me do a detective and look at that. That also can bring specific resources. If you want a certain video or other kind of document, it's going to bring that back to your computer. You can download it, etc. Perplexity and other LLMs went more on things like how-to guides. How do I do this? Which I know a lot of people, I use YouTube a lot for doing how-to. How do I change the fog lamp on my car or whatever? It can give you lots of videos. Perplexity is good at how-to. It's also good at summarizing. So instead of just giving you a bunch of links, it actually summarizes them a little bit better than Google. So that's going to what I just said probably will be different in 3 months or 6 months, but that kind of gives you an idea of where it is today. What I think is going to evolve, I'll leave us with a couple party belts on where I think things are going to go. Like I said, they're going to continue to converge on each other. I think we're going to see tools that bring the best of both worlds to users. And there will be new functionality that we can think of right now that are going to be introduced, I'm sure. There's also going to be better methods for determining whether the model is hallucinating. There needs to be controls in place, almost like AI looking at AI. Saying, hey, is this hallucinating? Let's do some fact checking here, like we were talking about earlier, see if this is actually hallucinating or what are the chances of this is hallucinating. So like a governance of sorts. And then integrating private data. So you can today can train in what's called fine tune model. You can actually train any of these large models that exist, feed in your own data, not just a prompt, but actually train it on build an actual neural network model. And it will, so if you have your company data, for example, say last year's results or what have you, or recent data, it can be trained into the model. You ask questions, what were my sales last quarter? It can tell you that answer based on yours. It's not publicly available. Your data does not get fed out into the world. It's based in your little, ecosystem. But you can actually train it on your data, which is pretty cool. So we just finish up in a minute or two here. So now we're getting close to time. Marketers. What about marketers and the impact? I think the biggest challenge is in the area of content creation. Will companies, will marketers and other companies in general, and anyone who owns a website feel the incentive to create new content when large language models just use it for free, ingest it, summarize it, but doesn't cite it? Obviously, that's going to have to change. SEOs have to compete currently today harder for those organic results because, like I said, people aren't always going down past that initial summary at the top. Search will have to differentiate between AI generated content and human content. So there'll be something in there where it's, hey, did this person use their time and resources in the brain to create something, or was it all just AI? Because if everyone's doing AI, like I mentioned earlier, and just building a bunch of content, ad infinitum, you're going to end up with a bunch of kind of for simple content. That's where we have to avoid work around. And how will the web function with fewer searches? Will there be will it have a website content online? It's just going to be fewer searches happening in the world. I think that HTML websites will become less widely used. I think we're going to have more alternatives and options for all of this, which is what points you both made earlier. But as long as human beings are playing a role in thought leadership, in guidance and strategy, whether it be in marketing or other areas of the world, the technology will be designed to search, summarize, and deliver that knowledge. It's right important.
Awesome.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think it is good for us to take a step back and just look at where we've been and where we're going. And right now, it seems to me like we've got to keep on the same types of strategies in terms of more long tail keyword SEO to try to help us maximize how we're being returned in the search results, right?
Completely agree, because that all is still happening. And I agree to your point, Deborah, it's not, oh gosh, let's just stop everything we're doing and change it all. No, it's not like that. We still need to build the content and helping people find the content for our customers and for our own companies, agencies. So that's absolutely going to, don't change that, but it will evolve as to how we go about that, how we create it and how we prepare our content so it can't be found by others.
Awesome.
Excellent. Christina, any final thoughts?
No, I'm sure we'll table some stuff and try to get Jed back here in a month or something and dive deeper into some stuff.
That would be a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
We love your knowledge and we're so appreciative of you taking a moment to share it with us and with our audience. So that's a wrap for us today. Thank you to the audience for joining us. And remember, it's every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. So we can just have some coffee together, have good conversation, and share some tips. So we hope that this was good information for everyone and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.